Probably the most common application of Votelling's law is to the competition between political parties. So, imagine there's two political parties that are competing for everyone's vote. Then literally by Votelling's, exactly the same as Votelling's logic, you get that both political parties will adopt the position of the median voter. And the median voter is the one who has an equal number of people to their left and to their right. Jesus. Okay. This is probably the most fundamental result in all of political science. And it's basically common sense, right? If you have a winner-take-all, two-party system, everyone gets driven to the center by political competition, right? If there's this simple, one-dimensional political system. But there's a lot missing from the median voter theorem. Andre, could you give some examples of what important political things are missing from the median voter theorem?
So having already seen the slide, I know that there might be people who don't vote, so you might want to cater to those. So those would be the exiting guys. And also there might be more than one dimension that people care about.
Great. Well done, Andre. Okay, so voters, if you think about it, political competition is usually along many dimensions. So for example, there are many different types of people who are in the middle of the political spectrum. They're going to be the people who are like super socially liberal but economically conservative, probably like a fair number of people here, I would guess. And then there are lots of other people. There are people who are in what's called the radical center, who are actually socially conservative and economically liberal. So those are very different types of people, right? So it's not like there's one guy in the middle, right? There's lots of different swing voters. And also not everyone votes, and this can lead to very important political dynamics because Bush spent all of his time running to the right and trying to make sure that his base turned out rather than staying at home. And so there's always a debate within parties. Do you try to worry about the exiters, or do you try to worry about the people who switch between the parties, right? But the thing is that Spence's logic is much more general than this, right? So Spence's logic more generally says that you should try to appeal to whoever might switch out of your party or not vote at all, who would otherwise be voting for you. Okay. Now, a nice application of this was by Matt Jenskow and Jesse Shapiro over here, and they used the Hotelling model to study the design of the slant of a newspaper. So they looked at local monopoly newspapers all over the United States, and they considered basically a single-dimensional model of the newspaper's political slant. They could either be to the left or to the right, but people may stop reading the newspaper, and that's the real threat. It's not that people are going to go read another newspaper, it's a monopoly. So it's just whether they read your newspaper or not. So people are going to choose as in the Spence model, and they're going to measure slant, and this was what was so clever about the paper, by looking at the language that the newspapers use. So what they did is, they looked for phrases that Republicans use much more often than Democrats do. Like Republicans use the word death tax and illegal aliens a lot, and Democrats almost never use those phrases. Whereas the Democrats use words like poor people, workers' rights. No, I'm dead serious. Poor people, workers' rights, and tax breaks a lot more than Republicans do. And so the ways they figured this out is they ran in the whole Congressional Record into some computer. They figured out which phrases the Democrats and which phrases the Republicans were using. And then what they did is they rated papers on whether they were likely to sound like a Democrat or sound like a Republican in terms of the words that they used. And then what they did is they broke local markets into different districts that have different political views and looked at which districts were more likely to read which papers. And sort of unsurprisingly, if the paper was really left-wing, people in the Republican areas of town were less likely to read them. If it was really right-wing, the people in the Democratic parts of town were less likely to read them. And they use this as a way to determine how much changing your slant will affect your readership, right? And they just used a Hotelling model, basically, except with these exits. And they showed how much, they basically used that to determine what is the average politics of someone in an area, and then, using exactly the median voter type logic, right, everyone would move to wherever the average political beliefs of that area, median political beliefs of that area were. And then they asked the question, are the papers maximizing their profits by choosing that point on the political spectrum, or are they maximizing the political views of whoever owns it? And the way that they did that is they said, what are the other papers that are owned by this guy? Is he sort of consistently in a way that would violate the markets that he's in, choosing a particular political belief? And I'm not going to show you all the data, all the different ways they cut the data, but just this is the basic regression. So they said, here's the market's percentage Republican, and here's the slant that things choose. And you see there's a very strong positive relationship, and it turns out that once you control for that, basically nothing else that you can come up with predicts where they're going to be in terms of political slant. And so that would be interpreted as basically evidence that the slant was chosen to maximize profits rather than chosen to maximize the political views of the owner. Okay. Another classic application of Spence's logic is to switching costs. So consumers often get addicted or locked into a product. So consumers at a bank find it very hard to switch banks because you have to sort of like port your whole life over to the other bank. Users of certain types of technology like a Macintosh or a PC find it really painful to switch over to the other product. People and companies that are in a city find it difficult to move out of that city. Lawyers and other client-based services are hard to switch because you sort of get used to using your lawyer and it would be a pain in the butt to find a new one, right? And so in this sense, firms always have an incentive to exploit the people who are locked in and to cater to the people who are new customers. So everything always looks better when you're shopping for it than once you actually have it. Because they have a big incentive to the people who haven't yet got stuck with it, try to attract, and then once you're stuck with it, you're stuck. So, one check on this, though, of course, is that they want to make sure that you come back and buy again, and that you don't leave. They want to make sure that you don't leave bad reviews that will alienate the next people. And they also want to make sure you don't just get like incredibly pissed off and try to sue them or something like that. So those are the main checks that make sure that they continue to keep quality. But it's still a very big phenomenon. I'm sure you've noticed how you always get catered to by things when you're not there, and then once you're there, you kind of, it never turns out to be as good as it looked like. And this is the subject actually of a very famous joke. So cities often cater to tourists. The natural corollary to this is cities often cater to tourists rather than the people who are stuck living there. And there's a famous joke about how David Ben-Gurion, the founder of the state of Israel, died and went up to God. And God said to him, look, you've been so good to my people, the Jews, I'm going to let you choose whether you want to go to heaven or to hell. And he said, okay, I want to look at both of them before I decide. So first he goes to heaven, and first he goes to hell. And they're all partying, there's all these beautiful women, everyone's getting drunk. It's like the Berlusconi administration. and then he goes up to heaven, and they're talking about product design, and the future of the state of Israel, and the theory. Now it's like up there, it's like the Obama administration, right? So he says, look, I live such a sober life. I did all this stuff for my people. I think I deserve some fun in the afterlife. So he decides to go to hell. And immediately they throw him onto the rack. They're pulling out his toenails. They're waterboarding him. Now it's like the Bush administration. And so the question is, so he says to Lucifer, what gives? I was here 5 minutes ago and it was so much fun. What happened? He said, well, then you were a tourist. And so that's the Spence distortion in action, right? Okay, so now let me talk about the idea of platforms. So in many situations, the characteristics of a product that are really most important are determined not by things directly under the control of the firm, but by who actually ends up using the product, right? So in this case, the consumers are going to both serve as consumers, but also as producers of the value of the product. And I'll therefore refer to them by the slightly vaguer term users rather than consumers or producers, right? So that'll capture both. And when user generation of the value of the product is important, I'm going to call them monopoly a platform. Another terms that other people use for these are two-sided markets and networks, but both of those also refer to other things. So I'm going to just stick with the word platform. So platforms, there's tons of examples of platforms, and they're an increasingly important part of the economy. So some include media platforms like newspapers, television, websites. All of them have, readers who they're trying to attract in order to be valuable to advertisers, right? So like most of the value that allows them to make profit is what's going on with other people who are participating. Payment platforms is another example. There's, credit cards, debit cards, PayPal. They need people who can both accept those forms of payment and to use them, and each group is part not just of generating profit for them, but of attracting the other group who they can generate profit off. Operating systems are another example. So smartphones, video games, any other sort of technology platform has people who have to develop applications for them, but they also have people who use the system. And both are both a source of profits directly, but also a source of attracting the other group. Transaction platforms are another example. eBay, financial markets. In financial markets, people who bring a lot of liquidity are valued a lot by the market, not because of the direct money they make off of them, but because they help bring in less liquid mutual funds, etc. Other examples include all sorts of dating platforms, dating websites, dating clubs, yellow pages, shopping malls, and many other examples. Yeah, go ahead.
Everything seems to be a platform, so why not? Give me an example.
Well, that's an excellent example. That's an excellent question. I think, first of all, there's lots of things that I think clearly platform doesn't say anything very useful about. So, like, I don't think a restaurant that relies on, like, you want to go there to see and be seen, that might be a platform. But if you're just going there to eat, or like a takeout place, that's not a platform. I mean, in other words, who's going there does not really affect whether you want to go there, right? I mean, most consumer products are not platforms. Like, water bottle. I don't care who else is, using this type of water bottle. I mean, but the thing is, the truth is, any product has some elements of platforms. I mean, there's usually some amount of consumption externality. The question is, do you think it's like a first order thing about the industry that like you need to be focusing on that aspect? Or do you think it's like, yeah, there's some of that, but that's not the main thing. So it's not like some industries are platform industries and others are not. It's that these are industries where like it's really important, the consumption externality, so like a huge part of the industry and you can't possibly understand it without it. And there's other areas where, that's not as much true. Yeah.
That was surprising to me. A lot of people that go to the restaurant do decide to go to the restaurant, and then I would think, yeah, I would want to go there too.
Well, yeah, that's what I said. So I think there's some aspects of it there. I think over most ranges, it's not like the most important aspect, and it's better to model that in terms of information rather than in terms of the direct externality. You know what I mean? So, okay. So if everyone thinks everything's a platform, that's all the more reason why we should think about platforms. So let's do it. Okay. So let me give a simple model of platform. A simple, not a simplest model of platform. Sorry. You have to cut me a slack. I didn't realize I had to teach this class until 7 a.m. Yesterday. So, okay. I want to take sort of the simplest model we can do of a platform to start with. And in this case, only the number of people participating is going to matter, not who participates, right? That's sort of the simplest way to write down a model. The identity of the consumers is going to be irrelevant.